we have informal discussion planned today, and we're gonna have two different discussions, and we'll start with talking about conferences, which I know has a lot of I don't know, questions around it. But I was wondering, should we do a quick round? I'm looking around, everyone probably knows each other on the call. But should we do a quick update, like a sentence or so, what's going on in your life, some updates, quick round. This is Lisa.
I can start.
Okay.
So in my world, my youngest son and my wife conspired to, right before the stay-at-home shelter order came in, to go out and get a new Bernedoodle puppy. Like we needed any more chaos in our lives. Sure, let's throw a puppy into the mix. So there are 4 teenagers, 2 dogs, my wife and I. She's teleworking from the first floor. I'm teleworking from the second floor. And my kids are zooming over there and zooming down there. And good God, good thing you're good bandwidth.
I can't top a new puppy.
It's crazy. I had no control over this. I just had to yield to the eventuality.
Mm-hmm.
So I can share my challenge for the next week is, I mean, aside from my class, which is another whole other thing, but the one that's a little bit different is that many of you probably know that I host 2 very large Passover Seders every year. Well, guess what? Passover in the normal sense is not happening. So I have a daughter in England, another daughter in Somerville, Massachusetts, and a sister in Maryland. And my daughter's in-laws are in Houston, Texas. And I'm going to try to orchestrate a virtual Passover Seder. So it should be interesting. The one thing we do know, and so don't try this, is you cannot sing on Zoom. Time delays are just too terrible to even contemplate. So when we do blessings and prayers, one person will do them. And I'm sure, and I have a young niece and nephew, and my daughters they always orchestrate doing the chocolate covered strawberries for Passover. And this will be done virtually this year. So we were going to see how this all plays out. It should be interesting.
Yes, indeed. Well, apologies for the facilitator being late. Too many things going on, and I'll note I may be interrupted by a plumber.
Issue me any demerits this week, Don, so you're safe.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. So, shall we begin? Announcements? What's going on?
Yeah, I think we were doing short introductions of everybody.
Okay.
Frank started us.
Okay, well, I'm Don Haas. I'm today's facilitator, and I am the Director of Teacher Programming at the Paleontological Research Institution in Ithaca, New York, and telecommute. I am no longer PRI's only telecommuter, as you might imagine. And I am in Buffalo, New York, and PRI has been very busily working to support other folks doing online learning and teaching on all the things that PRI does.
This is Wendy. I'll just say that in a workspace, we are deeply into managing risks and eventualities and contingencies for our summer courses, because every day is like a lifetime, and we're trying to make contingency planning and decide when drop dead dates, but we're now no longer using drop dead dates because that seems much too grim. So we're trying to we're trying to say deadlines.
That's good.
And what else? We're very happy that DataStream is already an online course, but we're being really generous with all of our teacher participants as they juggle realities trying to finish those courses. Eventually there is a deadline because they're part of a university system, but right now it's pretty much, if it takes you longer, everything is open. We're here to support you.
Sounds good. Well, this is Oops, not ahead.
I'm Deb. I'm out at the University of Washington, and I'm with you there, Dawn. I'm like kind of excited that everybody's joining my telecommuting life. So it's an interesting thing. So as many of you know, I live in Canada, but I work in Seattle and do a lot of travel for my on-site collaborative work. But now I work with Phil Bell at the Institute, and he's starting to understand that maybe like there's benefits and drawbacks, but it's a workable thing. So, which is awesome. After 4 years of working remotely with him, it's been great. The update that I kind of wanted folks to be aware of, because I know those of you teaching courses are aware of this, but I'm a research partner with the Council of State Science Supervisors. And so that's all the big like high-level policy folks dealing with science education systems in the state. And we're doing our new research project with them, involves all 50 states. So we're currently in 3 days of meetings with them. It starts in the next hour for their virtual conference for the year. And so we had like 105 participants yesterday. And we presented on the new project. And one of the things that is really coming up across that network for the last few weeks, we've been working with various people in states to try and deal with how to get school systems into home-based or virtual learning. And we're working in like 7 different working groups across the states to try and figure that out. And just to push back on the idea that we should have youth, especially like elementary, sitting in front of a computer. Like, so trying to like encourage different home-based learning options and like taking it down a notch in this time when people are all stressed out that we're not going to meet the same learning goals, like kind of what Dawn was saying, and like really being reasonable about like what can be done, but also understanding that that science learning may be the moment when kids can just get out of the like go in and be like play and have fun and like investigate things. That might be a bright spot in their day. So like trying to figure that out. And so it's been an intense few weeks. Like so many others have like slowed down their workload, and mine like cranked up like 2 notches. So it's been, and I feel like we're like calm now after having given the presentation yesterday. Frank and I got a proposal submitted yesterday. Like I'm just like, so yeah.
That's great. I'm going to jump in and I'm Katie Boyd, the Clean Program Manager, and I also work at Series Education and Outreach. And I think, yeah, Deb, what you were saying around that we're not going to meet the same learning goals, and maybe this is a time to encourage more of that outdoor play. That's something we've been trying to think about for, we're creating a page on Clean. I'm hoping by the end of this week, we're going to start sharing it out we're calling it sort of resources for families. So this, idea, especially kind of targeting younger kids, but also having things in there for any age, but just this idea of like parents who are home with kids and trying to think of like educational things they can do. And we have a whole section at the bottom just around like kids getting out in nature and how important that is for later perspectives and views on environmental issues and behaviors and things like that. And so we're trying to push that idea a lot too on our page. So thanks for bringing that up, Deb. And it's really important right now. And we're trying to work on that also. And I'm with you. I felt like my workload like spiked for a little bit there. And I think as people get into this remote learning, it's kind of coming back to normal a little more this week. So I feel you. It's funny. It's like all the people who can't really do their work from home is like, they're like, I have all this time, and people are talking about like, I'm a puzzle person, I love puzzles, but I can only ever do them like once or twice a year because I just don't have the time. And like I have all these friends now who are like, I've never done a puzzle, and I just did a puzzle, and I'm like, I wish I had the time for that. How do you have more time now? I have less. But yeah, no, I think it's coming down and we're getting more into the swing of it, so I'm hoping for that too.
I can give an update about climate generation. My name's Lindsay. I'm the Climate Change Education Manager at Climate Generation. I know a lot of you actually now. Woohoo! So I think climate generation is in the same spot as a lot of you, making a pivot to offering virtual programs or offering webinars about how to virtually adapt existing curricula. And we came up with every 2 weeks, we're going to offer a new webinar or interactive meeting. And we'll just create those based on data that we collect from the participants of the previous webinar about what they want. Right now, you know, our first webinar, we had 100 people register and 80 people participate. And the data that I've looked through so far is they want resources. They would like people to provide virtual programs directly for their students. And they want continuing interactive meetings or webinars to show how to adapt resources. So that's the information we're using to create our programs right now, at least until something more comes up. I think something different that I haven't heard anyone really talk about that we're doing or trying to do is guide the conversation about the links between COVID-19 and climate change and how we can think about social injustice and equity and just being a thought leader in that area, because we see a lot of people grabbing onto positive environmental changes that are happening because of social isolation, and, you know, thinking critically about how we can be equitable in those discussions is something that we're doing. So we created a toolkit, which is called COVID-19 Climate Change Connections, where we link to articles that talk about these things, link to nonfiction and fiction books that might help people think about it, and then have started pulling in some materials that are being created by like C3 teachers and ELA, using some of those social skills to figure that stuff out. And that's all I've got.
Okay, who else haven't we heard from? We're just doing introductions for folks who have popped on in the last few minutes.
So I'll hop in here. Hi everyone, I'm Megan Carter, the Community Director for the Earth Science Information Partners. I don't work directly with teachers, but my role is to kind of manage or help facilitate the many different virtual collaborations that ESIP has, of which CLEAN is one of them. These are very different themed topics, and my observation has been that our virtual collaborations are as busy as they've ever been, and they sort of span the wide range of, like, you show up to the call and COVID is all anybody wants to talk about, and it's very disruptive from to like people totally not even mentioning it, business as usual. So for me, it's been kind of exhausting, but fine to just try to cater the support to what these different groups seem to need. And I've definitely been finding some relief in doing some just regular ongoing tasks, things that are predictable, like you know, planning for our next board meeting, or at the same time, you know, we're planning for one of ESIP's 2 annual meetings that's supposed to happen in July, and we don't have an official statement yet on exactly whether that will be a physical meeting or a virtual meeting. So thinking about what all the opportunities might be, and not looking at moving to virtual as a negative thing if that is what ends up happening, but also to look at the unique opportunities that might allow, and to think about things like the impact on climate change if 300 of us decide not to get on airplanes and go to Vermont. So that's kind of the ESIP, little look into what's going on at ESIP right now.
I want to build a little bit on what Megan said, because I've found, especially with helping faculty at Bentley University move to their classes to online environment, is that our experience, both in the CLEAN network working virtually and ESIP working virtually, and having so much experience in that area really helps all these other people who have never really used it. So I mean, we actually, each of us individually can really help a lot of other people by just bringing our experience to the conversation to help people move to that kind of an environment.
I guess I'd like to jump in here. This is kind of like a mix of silly and practical, but I'm going to share my screen for a minute. Because playing over the weekend, it was can everybody see that silly image?
Yeah.
Okay, so over the weekend was my birthday, and I was applying some of the stuff that we were working on. Deb, you were giving examples of how to moderate these settings. So because I was doing science illustration and storytelling, what I was using was the sketchboard feature on Zoom, so that people could jump in with their ideas, and we could sort of use that visual space as a shared facilitation tool to incorporate both the science and the art together. So if nobody's played with that feature yet, as a way of tying this together, that worked really great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Jimmy Callahan here. I can go ahead of our work, which is both on, of course, large public events, which are curtailed right now. But since our volunteers are also in-school educators, we work with schools, we work with the school district, we teach thousands of students in a year in school. Of course, the students are getting a chance to, they take spring break, as people are saying, so this is not in contradiction to have them take the opportunity to abide by shelter in place as in the Bay Area or DC, but to, you know, it doesn't mean you can't go in your backyard, doesn't mean you can't go out and keep social distancing. But there's another thing that our students have, which is their social connection, right? They're missing that at school. They're not being with their friends. They're not interacting. They're not at recess. And our students in particular, what do they socialize about? One of the biggest things that's most important to them is they socialize about teaching climate change and taking action on climate change. That's what our students, that's one of the biggest things in their lives. So how are we keeping that going? Fortunately, I think we're turning out to be pretty resilient because while it's geared toward in school and billed to the public, there's always been a component of making videos of what we do and for the students to make videos of what's going on. So there's a lot of switching now over to that. In some ways, you know, there's that thing other people have is there is both all the terror and all the, you know, the terrible things and the difficulty and all that, but there's also sometimes for some of us who are fortunate, there's kind of a relief. We have hundreds of hours of video that we have a chance now to kind of go through, and the students are able to finally get the voiceover to be able to release these videos. Now that takes time, and that's some of what we're doing. So a lot of the students are writing their scripts, they're doing their voiceover. We're learning techniques of how students can be at each other. They can socialize by sending each other the audio and talk to each other. We're going to see if we can have Zoom for the middle school students. But they're able to, like, some of the students are, we're working on a soundtrack where they're going to narrate together in front of the White House. Well, one will make their sound and the other will make their sound, and we'll edit together in stereo. So there's things like that going on. So anyway, there's some pretty interesting things are going because we don't want to be telling the students, well, all our action that we've been taking about climate change is shut down. No, it's switching to sharing it and being ready for when all the events that have been postponed are back on, and when it's okay to keep your social distance and wash your hand, but still be out among the public. So anyway, that's it. The other one I do want to mention, maybe before even a topic, thank you, Frank, as always, for facilitating, encouraging others to remember to dip and to clean. If perhaps at some point we might mention later in the call these webinars that are happening on April 7th from BARD and from Climate. These are pretty massive, and I can speak from history of working with Eben Goodstein. We work with them in Focus the Nation in 2008. At the very least, I think, Clean, we want to pay attention to it because this definitely has a component of how to what to educate with on other level. But they've got things in every state. It's I'm going to give a quick thing on it. It's April 7th, next Tuesday. It won't conflict with the telecall. There's one for each state, and typically it is local time. 5 to 7 p.m., 6 to 7 p.m. It's in that range. I'll put a link in the chat about it. It's something at least we should be aware of. And one of the organizers is to come on this call later today. So be ready. It's David Blockstein. He will be coming in on the call. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Anyone else want to introduce themselves, or a few we haven't heard from yet?
Let's see.
Sure, I'll throw in a few words. This is Frank Granshaw from Portland, Oregon. And it's a very interesting time because I'm retired and adjunct faculty. I had chosen a long time ago not to teach next quarter. That being said, I'm finding that I'm doing a fair amount of consulting work with colleagues who have been thrust into all of this, because I taught distance learning for probably 15 years before I retired. So it's kind of an interesting mixture of what retired life should look like and still working, which is fine by me. The one thing that sort of is on the top of my brain right now, some of you may have heard of a workshop that was scheduled for the 26th of May in Germany that was called It's the End of the Cops as We Know It. This is Wuppertal Institute. I probably butchered that name. However, I got an email back from one of their organizers saying, well, we're thinking about making it remote. And so that's something that is in the docket and would be worth watching, particularly since the rumor that I'm hearing is there's talk about canceling COP26. There had also been talk about making it remote, and that was not taken favorably by a number of people who were in decision-making, roles. But all this is of interest to me because of the fact that the folks here locally have been looking at doing a virtual bridge to COP26. It would be kind of a replay of our expansion, not replay, of our virtual bridge to COP25 that we had organized here in Portland. So anyway, yeah. Otherwise, not the sun shining. I love it.
Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, thanks. Other folks want to introduce themselves?
Hi, I just went away and came back. So I clicked on the video. I didn't think you guys really wanted to see that I was still working on putting together these packets because I'm mailing off to the 25 teachers that are in our course right now. It's Our Climate, Our Communities, and it was supposed to be hybrid. So we made it to our first face-to-face, and then the closing of all schools, et cetera, happened. And we quickly too, as many of you I heard in the past few minutes did a pivot to online. And we've mostly been able to adapt to that. But yeah, I feel like I'm working double time in order to make that happen. What I'm really impressed with is 24 out of 25 teachers showed up at that first session, which we only had 1 week to give notice and for people to make the adaptations with childcare and all the other things they had to do in order to make that meeting. So I do think this is an opportunity to look at what we can do. And Dawn, I think you're the one who said Zoom is our new friend. And I think that's quite the case. I did want to give a shout out to Climate Generation. I too really feel like this is an amazing stretch between what's going on with the COVID virus and how it's one of the big wicked problems that actually helps prepare the skill set that we need in order to address climate change at scale. So I think this group is in a really good position to think about that and to facilitate making that happen in a lot of different ways. So I'm just very appreciative for everybody who is here and stepping up to the plate in so many ways.
Thanks, Jane. DeVrida or Bonnie?
Yeah, hi everyone. Well, I will start with sharing a little bit of good news. In my department at the School of Natural Resources, for fall, we will be formally launching. Last year there was an informal version, but this year we'll be formally launching a climate literacy natural resources course. It will be a 200 level course. It is entirely designed based on systems thinking approach and leverages the climate literacy principles. So it was launched last year, and we had student evaluations. And right now I am working on a more thoughtful integration of the principles. As I see so far from an education researcher perspective, they still are two different silos and not so well integrated. But so that's the work, and I'll be teaching it. So I'm looking forward to something. The COVID has brought another challenge, is that we have a lot of folks in our school that are older and feel at risk for face-to-face teaching. So those other folks need to step up and sign up for more classes and work up more formats for teaching classes and everything. So this is going to be another class that will be out in the mix at a 200 level. So other than that, I just wanted to share with you guys, because this has been my only focus going forward.
Cool. Sounds good.
Thanks, Tavardi. Good to see you. Good to see everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, we at NASA have been on mandatory telework since, well, I guess this is the third week now. So we've been doing the shelter in place for a good bit of time now. And it's been interesting to really see, and encouraging, I will say, to see the many people in leadership at NASA focusing on the people over the mission. And so that's been an encouragement. If I could share a bright spot there, that's something I find very encouraging. So there's a lot of support there. I will say it's also very helpful, as Tamara said, to have a great deal of experience in virtual work. Sometimes I would look at myself in the camera and wonder if it was me or a recording of a previous session I was watching, because I had done so much work in virtual events. But that is really coming in handy now, and it has allowed me to be a help to others, which is great, because helping others in this time of change is really a good way, I think, to stay sane. So that's been really an encouragement as well. The place where my efforts in climate change education most play out currently are with Elena Sparrow's workshop, which I'm a part of her proposal. And so that workshop involves teachers going to Alaska every year to learn about what's happening in the Arctic and how the changes in the Arctic do not stay in the Arctic. That is not going to be an on-site workshop this year. As you can imagine, it's supposed to take place June 1st, and none of us are expecting that groups of people will be meeting together by June 1st. Just as a little aside, yesterday, I live in Virginia, our governor has put us on mandatory lockdown through June 10th. So I know that varies from state to state, but it eliminated me from going anywhere in that time frame. So that's one of the things I've been focusing on with Elena and her team, is figuring out how we can best do that, because although virtual is a great resource now, it does not replace being together to experience things and discuss things, and that's a critical element of that workshop, and I imagine much of the work that we're all doing. So I share that thought in hopes that at some point we will be able to do some of this real time and be together again, because I think that's an irreplaceable element of the work we're all doing. So thank you everyone for being here. It's good to see your faces.
Thanks. I think, have we heard from
Hi.
everybody?
No, this is Jen Kretzer from the Wild Center. Hi, everybody. It's great to see everyone. I look forward to these calls every week, and I'm so happy that we're on Zoom now so I can see everybody. Let's see. We've also, so I'm in upstate New York, as I think most of you know. Our museum is closed now for the foreseeable future, so all of our programs are pivoting quickly online across the institution, and so that's been a big shift for us. We had I think diversity events just for the climate team planned in the next couple of months, and most of those
have canceled or postponed. We have a couple of things that are starting to kick off virtually though. We have a virtual youth climate summit that I think is going to happen in Western New York. That, you know, Don, you're probably involved with it, that Kelly Grabowski is organizing, who's a teacher. She's actually also been involved at Climate Generation. So I'm really excited to see how that happens. And so we're starting to think about like what that might look like. So while I'm disappointed and sad to see those events cancel, I also do think it's an opportunity to rethink how we intersect and interact, and how we can potentially become more, reach more people and reach in new ways, and like think very innovatively about how to do that. And I am really excited to hear if anybody has ideas around that. As you know, I'd love, I think maybe one of these sessions could be really strategizing and talking about those best practices. I was in a meeting over the weekend. It was like death by Zoom. It was like literally 9 hours of Zoom presentations, and it just doesn't work. That just doesn't work. It doesn't work. Everybody take note, doesn't work. So I know Lindsay and I had talked the other day, and she shared a great resource called, I think it's called Training for Change, right, Lindsay? Which is, I actually did get signed up on one of their webinars, Lindsay, but there's some great resources there about facilitating online trainings that's maybe a little bit different than like just talking heads in a Zoom Brady Bunch setting like we've got going on here. And I would love to continue to talk about creative ways that are involving both online, but also maybe connecting in different ways. Anyway. We are still doing our webinar launching our Youth Climate Summit program, new toolkit, and that's on the 7th of April, and I will share that. I'll put the link for that in the chat. But other than that, we are just really trying to rethink and reimagine our virtual connections with folks. So thanks. And I think Amy Frame, who I don't see you, but I think you haven't introduced yourself if you want to, or you could do it in the chat, I guess.
And Dave has popped on too.
Sure. Hi, folks. Just really quickly, I'm Amy Frame from 10 Strands, working throughout the state of California, and really appreciate hearing about all the positive ways that we're finding to continue these online collaborations. I've seen people, I work a lot with STEM coordinators at county offices of education. And what I've seen is a strong concern that in the rush to have students learn about, to keep up on ELA and math, that in a lot of cases science is being lost. But then I also see a really thoughtful approach to understanding that teachers are needing time to just understand how to use the platforms, and then how to connect with their students, and then how to use them to actually teach, and then how to use them for content-specific teaching, and realizing that we're learning quickly, but that there can be some rhyme or reason to this. And by the time teachers are ready for that, the vast array of resources and partners that are rushing to get things ready for teachers, probably teachers will be ready for it at that moment. So I'm optimistic that when teachers are given a little bit of freedom, that climate change can maybe rise to the top of their agenda in ways that it wouldn't have before. That's it. Thank you, guys.
And welcome, David. Do you want to say a little bit about your event that's coming up and introduce yourself, of course?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, hi, I'm David Blockstein. Nice to reconnect with some old friends and see some others as well. So as I guess James probably mentioned already, and hopefully you've all seen some of our publicity, that I'm working with Eben Goodstein from the Bard College Center for Environmental Policy on a webinar project that at one time we thought it was going to be the world's largest virtual teach-in on climate solutions and climate justice, and it may still. Even in these times, next Tuesday, generally at 5 p.m. local time. We have somewhere on the order of 45 statewide and including 5 international webinars on climate solutions that are generally hosted by universities. And the idea is that we're trying to reach out to students and to community members to show them that there are statewide solutions that are possible and feasible about how to tackle climate change, especially how to take advantage of the changing prices of much improved prices of renewable energy and oncoming technologies, battery storage, as well as to tie that in with community issues, climate justice, energy justice, things like that. So in each case, there will be a statewide webinar that will go on for roughly an hour. It will be focused on identifying 3 key actions that could take place at a state level in terms of policy, and then how can students and others be engaged. One of the reasons, of course, for doing it at this time is that with everything else going on, it is an election year, and so one of the things that we're really pitching in terms of ways that people can be involved is to put these issues in front of political candidates, find out candidates who they like, and get involved in the campaigns for those people. With the shift that has taken place now to online education, in a certain way we're maybe pre-adapted to that. We're providing content that can be used by educators, and so we're using the hashtag Make Climate a Class. We have about 50 interns, social media interns that have been sharing that out in a variety of social media efforts and media. So all of these webinars will be recorded, and we will have them up on our website for teachers, whether they're at colleges and universities, high schools, middle schools, even if they're at least a little bit sophisticated, and to try to provide that as content that encourage the students, the teachers to assign the students to watch the webinar and then have a discussion in class. We have about 24 teacher's guides, just kind of a one-page summary of how you could use this in a discussion regardless of the topic, whether it's English or ethics or statistics or economics, as well as environmental topics. So we're hoping that there'll be a lot of people that will tune in and be happy to share anything else. And thank you all also. I know a number of you have shared this out. I don't know if you've been the one, Don, but we just got off a call with our leaders, and the New York State leader says that there's over 600 people signed up in New York, including 14 classes,
awesome.
a dozen high schools that have already signed on. So appreciate all the outreach that's already going on.
Hey, Dave, it's great to see you. It's been a little while.
Yeah.
You mind if I ask you a question about the resource page that's supporting
Sure.
this? You know, because I mean, you're talking to some of the leaders of this field, and I was looking at that page, and I was thinking that, you know, the teacher guides, you know, there's a awesome opportunity for collaboration with the people who are in the clean community network, but you know, it's not really fully there. is there some, I mean, this is not, we don't have a lot of time here, but is there some things that we could do to collaborate quickly? I would think the content, specifically on the resource, guides would be very, very easy. Is that something that
Sure.
we could
Absolutely,
collaborate?
yeah. I mean, if there's somebody who wants to either provide additional guides or provide edits to what we have, the best way is to just reach out to me directly at solveclimate2030@gmail.com, and I can help you get in. Part of the problem on this is that we're a little bit constrained because we're using Bard College's website, and apparently Eben is the only one who's actually allowed to edit, and so we didn't boost up the resources in the way that we had intended to. But it's not too late, and especially because we're talking about not only using them on April 7th, but then over the rest of the academic term. So yeah, that'd be awesome if we could have some ways to integrate with the fabulous resources that the Clean community has developed over the past decade.
Absolutely.
David and Frank, if I could jump in, Jim Callahan. So especially if, because the time is short, we want to do this, speaking from experience with Focus the Nation, which was this thing that happened in 2008 to 2010, massive, that I know Eben was, so speaking that I know Eben is open to this because we did this together in 2008, is like climatechangeeducation.org at the time was a pretty important portal. We were developing a lot of resources for universities in every field, high schools in every field, and so there was cross-linking, right? We developed it. It didn't have to all be, and it was because actually Focus the Nation was sort of overloaded by doing resources and they weren't a portal website like me. So like Focus the Nation linked to us, we linked to it, and I encourage that as at least a backstop to making this work with Clean, because absolutely, David, you'll be hearing from me. You really want to make sure that you're linking to Clean.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and just to be clear, like linking to Clean is not just linking to the Clean, like it's the network of people and all of their networks, because like we all have these deep networks in our own spaces.
Right.
And without linking to us, there's like a giant hole in the work that you're doing. Because like I looked at the Washington State page, and you don't have any connection to the Climb Time Project or the Climate Impacts Group at University of Washington, and the folks there are wonderful, but just to try and make sure we can push that out further in the state is an important move.
Yeah, and I mean, I do want to, fairness to the Washington State, that Western Washington that's hosting it was just getting underway when you guys hit the first wave of Corona, and so the fact that they're even able to pull off a webinar is
that's great.
It's kind of amazing. But yes, and I mea culpa, because I should have. I mean, I'm aware of you all and what you've done, and so yeah, we should be reaching out more, and it's not too late.
Yeah.
Can I add one thing to that?
Please, yeah.
I wanted a disclaimer that I didn't specifically link to Clean Network in our blog for these virtual resources is because I felt like I would be doing educators a disservice by linking to a community that doesn't have all virtual resources collated in one spot for them. So instead I picked through it and picked the best ones, or picked resources that were very particular to what they had said they wanted in the registration. So I wonder, I mean, maybe that's something we need to think about as a community. How do we pull and choose from the Clean Network to make like, in our search down, can we make a searchable option for virtual or digital or distance learning resources so that it can be easily found?
Yeah, I mean, I love this idea. These are things we've been talking about on Clean for a while, is different tags we can use for searching. And I'm just going to be 100% totally honest with all of you. I think we need that. I like am one of the only people who really like work on clean, and like I do not have the bandwidth for that, for something like that. We've been talking about adding a tag on Spanish language, and we're really struggling with, like, we've added this tag and going into the future we're going to do it, but going back into 700 resources and trying to determine what gets that tag or not. And so I think I struggle with that here as well. So what we have done is, and I put the link for that site, we're working on it. We have collected quite a few resources we think are good for specifically online and learning at home. And so we have tried to collate some of those into a page, but we are kind of targeting that more for families, thinking, you know, and we're trying to think about how we can do something similar for teachers as well, but it's just hard to consider with every school and district and teacher sort of doing different amounts of this online learning and different processes and methods for it. You know, there's some things that some teachers may feel is good for that and others don't. And so I'm just sort of struggling with kind of how to do it for teachers. We've been doing it for families. We have been working on that, and we have a page for that, which I put in the chat earlier and I can put in again. But yeah, I'm just going to kind of throw out there a little bit around the like realities of clean, that it's a big project and a lot is happening, and we've actually been losing people on it, and we've hired a few more people in our group, but you know, they're slowly coming on, and we've lost a couple of undergrad students who work on it and things like that. So like we've actually already been struggling a little bit on like clean and the manpower we have on, or excuse me, person power we have on that already. And then with all of this, that's what I was saying earlier, it feels like it's like, oh my gosh, now there's so much more we need to be doing, we should be doing. So we're working on it and trying to figure that out. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there.
Katie, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So
Quickly, and then we need to
suggest potentially, I was just going to suggest potentially to think about, we have that maintenance review process in clean. It would be a slower way of getting things tagged with these new kinds of tags, but you could potentially have a small group of them that as you do the maintenance, or whoever does the maintenance review, to identify those that might be considered. And that'll just, I think it just incorporates it into your work line of your workflow. That's just an idea. I don't know exactly how you're doing it now, the maintenance review now, but that may be one way of doing that in a slow way, but that would actually end up getting all the resources eventually.
Okay, this has been a good discussion of lots of interesting things, and I'll paste in again the link that I stuck in at the very beginning of the meeting, and note that we are having discussions about how this provides an opportunity to think about long-term changes for the educational system. And I'll just drop that bomb and say, we need to talk a little bit about AGU. And so I'm gonna hand it over to Anna to talk about AGU.
Hi, yeah, thank you. As you all know, or we've mentioned before, there is the session proposal deadline coming up for AGU, April 20th. Obviously, as I mentioned at the very beginning of the call, there's lots of questions around large gatherings of thousands and thousands of people from all over the world. And I do think there's so many related questions to this. And I think it's still all very much up in the air of if these are going to happen at all. And if they do happen, I think they're going to be different than we know them very much. On the other hand, there is a session call, and we are, as you know, it's great to hear all the different efforts going on. And there are so many connections with the pandemic and climate education. I do still think it would be great to put in placeholders for presence, and I think that those might be virtual. They might, I'm sure AGU and all these big conferences are thinking about alternative formats. So in the past, and I have put in the chat what we've proposed in the past. And so last year, if you remember, we started proposing 12 sessions. And the last year we scaled back to 5, and this was pretty successful. And I think we only had to merge a couple of the sessions, and we got a lot of abstracts. I talked with Katie yesterday, and we were going to propose maybe an even more streamlined approach this year, that we can propose a poster session, and we've done that as the community session, where in a face-to-face event, there's been people walking around, there's been posters around all the different projects, and it's a way to socialize, so that we could propose that, and then maybe 2 sessions, maybe possibly cutting along audiences, saying, anything informal science education, anything formal science education, and just have 3 placeholders for climate education in the system. But I wanted to put it out there. I don't know if people are very motivated to put in more and a large variety of sessions, or how this all sounds.
So Anna, one quick thing. I mean, the huge unknown is whether the fall meeting at AGU is going to actually happen. Right. That's a huge unknown. But I think, from my feeling of the landscape on this issue, it's going up, not down. And so I think, I mean, this past year was very robust, even with decreased federal funding, which has always been something Tamara and I have wondered, when the clean climate literacy AGU space would shrink more, and it's kind of stabilized for the past couple of years. So, and I think, we're still going to be in San Francisco. So I'm of a mind that we include more, not less. And one of the biggest areas for expanding, and since we have Amy and Deb online here as 2, is the state level work. That's one of the biggest new emerging things that's happened across the country. So if I was going to add a focus, it would be really subnational or state level climate literacy related work. I mean, Lindsay, the work you guys do in Minnesota, the list goes on, right? But that's a new emerging area that I think is really worth digging into deeply as a community.
I would love to include that, Anna, just because I would love to hear more about others and the way that they're actually doing larger scale institutional change around educational spaces. So like the work from CERC too, Tamara, like how we're creating, and clean generally, like how are we creating systems change around educational things, and that crosses both informal and formal education. And we are ready this summer, like we have all our casework done as of sort of June this year. So we're ready to be able to present on this in a lot of different ways now, which we weren't really last year. It was like too many things.
Jim Callahan, I'll note, and Frank, to back that up, like at AGU last year, the way in which posters would be congregated and work together, there were certainly examples of California state programs that were very friendly to us, but weren't connected. Nothing's as bad there, but there would be a natural connection. It's not technically a state level, but we have districts or parts of California that are under for instance, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, which does quite a lot of things, including youth summits and so on. There's districts all over. There were posters from many of the air districts throughout the state. So that was an example. It would not be hard to check in with the California Energy Commission. I know I'm talking California, but of course it is hometown for San Francisco. California Public Utilities Commission. There'll be programs to say, hey, so I mean, in terms of the state program, it always helps to have the home state be among those that are doing it. And I'm sure we could, if you all would like to see something that's working with the state, I'm glad to do our part.
Yeah, and I think we could come up with a New York something or other as well. And in putting in whatever proposals go in, I think we should mention that we are considering how to do this virtually for the review process I personally have no intention of going to large meetings in 2020.
And I do think AGU does facilitate, they call them, I can't remember what they call them, novel or alternative formats.
They-
So we
they
could do
They
that.
do live streaming.
Yeah, and they're
Yeah,
interested.
but they also have
streaming, but
virtual ones that are where you can have an asynchronous discussion online.
Yeah,
Do you
they're
have to
definitely
specifically
interested.
ask for those? Because I just
increasing
know in the past, haven't a lot of those been restricted to certain sessions? Like it's not every session that has that
Right.
ability.
Yes, yeah, that is the case. I attended the Affiliated Societies meeting last year at the annual meeting, and much of the discussion was on how to better virtualize the meeting. So the leadership of AGU was thinking about this before COVID-19. I am sure they are thinking about it in more depth now. So I attended representing NAGT.
One thing I'd like to mention related to all that is the inclusivity it provides.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we, NASA, are finding that it may not be possible to have interns on the NASA centers this summer, for example. And so we're thinking of virtual internships. Well, how interesting is that? Because now if you are Native American and you didn't want to leave your community to come to a NASA center for 10 weeks, but you wanted to do an internship, you can now do that. And I think we may find the same thing is true of the AGU sessions. And so, Frank, I want to say I love that idea. I don't have anything to add to the state level, but I will say that the focus on that K-12 workforce development combination was to involve students and to involve institutions both. And I think they would, each of those or both of those would have an interest in the state kind of work that's happening as well, because they are all in a state somewhere, you know, and so it might be interesting for them to hear what's happening more broadly in their state and then more broadly in other states as well.
Absolutely, Bonnie. And I think that's why the focus of it shouldn't be necessarily on any scale or anything, but on the way in which we are engaging in novel systems change work around educational spaces, because like that is critical for us to be able to learn about, to think of how we can tap into that in our local efforts that are more spatially regional. So yeah, that would be amazing.
So here's a technological question for anyone who might have knowledge about it. When we did the bridge last December, the idea behind that was somebody coined the word watch parties, having groups of people communicating via distance, as well as viewing recorded. All the cops have a lot of, you can stream a lot of the cops actually. But the problem with the model is that they've got set right now, it's one person sitting behind their computer, you get bored, you go on to watch YouTube or what have you, and you don't have that sort of social reinforcement of having a group of people that you're gathered with. Is there any way that things like what we've got going here right now, a Zoom call, can actually end up pulling in, say like AGU on-demand sessions or UNFCCC COP sessions, what have you? Is anybody familiar with that?
Well, like technologically?
Yeah.
Yes. So yes.
Okay. It has been done.
And ironically, for instance, I just had our local yoga group pull a Zoom meeting together and pull their Facebook live streaming into the Zoom meeting. So like there's multiple ways to do that, which was funny. That was like a friendly, like how to use technology moment for me. But anyway, so yeah, for sure there is. Yeah.
So Deb, could you send me over maybe a short little list of how you did that?
Yep, and we did it inside the Climb Time Initiative too. We had on the fly problem solving with 2 different Zoom link meetings because the superintendent for public instruction gave a webinar in the middle of our Zoom, and we fed them together too. Yeah.
Okay, that'd be great.
The link that I shared on our on rethinking, looking for opportunities for changing the educational system while it's wounded. That was the introductory event in Science in the Virtual Pub, which is transitioning from Buffalo Science in the Pub to virtual Science in the Virtual Pub. And we'll be doing that every other Thursday night for the duration of 7:30 Eastern time. And it worked. We had 55 folks show up last Thursday. Awesome. And I gave a presentation of about 25 minutes, and then we had conversation for another hour. And I think lots of people were engaged. There'll be a recording up, I hope, today of that, linked from the page that I put in the chat, which I'll paste in again.
That is awesome.
And we'll continue that. Like I said, every other Thursday, and we may actually, we're meeting tonight, we might actually go to weekly, because I think there's enough interest to have it go weekly. We had, for the Science in the Actual Pub, we were doing the last Wednesday of the month, and we had speakers scheduled through September. So I think that by a week from now, we'll have a schedule fleshed out for the next couple of months if we do the every other week thing, and maybe for the next month if we're just going weekly.
Yeah, this would be great, because I'm meeting with we're meeting with a couple of folks from Bonn on Thursday, and the idea of physical watch parties is just not realistic. This would be great to have this alternative format.
I interrupt myself to deal with a misbehaving cat.
One of the is actually what we're doing right here, right? Because Clean has since, I mean, we're since we formed in 2008, held weekly telecons. I mean, just that statement alone, right? We've held weekly telecons since 2008 is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
They're archived, but the listserv, webinars or phone calls, archived, and website. Those three things, right? They're related, but isn't that hard to actually do? But I think one of the things that is what are you driving toward? What is the conversation leading to? Because that's the thread, right? Because it comes and goes, but then there tends to be a point that just having open conversations is one thing, and that may be, but I think we're much more purposeful in this space. I think what is our purpose, that we are finding a way. And I want to come back to somebody had said, and I don't remember who it was, but this equity piece is because AGU is exclusive, COP is exclusive, NAAE is exclusive. All of these things exclude.
Well, anything that all of those things cost at least $1,000 to get to.
Right. And not everyone can make it, right? So every time we're in a room, we know there's way more people that should be in that room than are, for a variety of reasons, and cost is definitely one of them. Badge wall is a real thing.
And conflicts is another. I've got to hop off for another meeting. So.
Exactly. I'm already 3 minutes late for my next meeting. So
we'll see you later.
Bye.
But my larger point here was that I think we've already demonstrated in this community some of the elements that you would want to weave together. It's not that hard.
Yeah, my issue was just how to marry two different platforms, basically. Yeah.
Deb already worked that out.
Okay, cool.
And she's going to share that with all of us, right? Shared expertise.
Hopefully.
Because that's one I don't have any knowledge of, so yay. Thanks, Deb.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
That was great.